Hello friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to share my take on this palette from Anastasia or ABH. This is the Fall Romance palette, y'all, and I picked it up as soon as I could off of the ABH website, although now I believe it's on Ulta and Sephora as well. It's $55 and it is their big fall release palette. So we're going to talk about this, share swatches, share looks. I'm going to do a tutorial on this look I did today so you can see it in action. And yeah, just give my overall impressions on this. So we have a 12 shade palette here. Everything in the top row has some sort of shimmer, although I would say it's varying intensities. Ember here feels like a matte shade with some embedded little like sparks appropriately, but I haven't done a look so far where those show a lot. Divine right here, your purple, that has a smooth sort of sheen to it, almost like a soft metallic. And then these shades are about as sparkly as they look. I would say Moonlight is a bit more sheer, kind of a layering shade. Crown kind of feels that way as well. I mean, it can be intense, but I see it as something that will give you different effects depending on what you semi-layer it on top of. Fireside, super pretty shade paired with all this earthy darkness down here. And then Smoke is a soft, beautiful shimmer that just shines. I mean, it looks like a basic taupe in the palette, but it is so incredibly shiny and reflective. So when I saw that this palette was coming out, when I just saw the exterior of this palette, because I think that was how they first announced it. They didn't show anything but just the outside. And by the way, it is kind of a velvety finish. It has almost a grain. I don't know if you can tell that things are going this way and that, almost like fur. So as soon as I saw that, as soon as I saw the outer packaging, I thought, I think this is going to be a palette I'm interested in. And then seeing the inside, I thought, 100% I'm going for this. And the thing that I feel like maybe I could have realized if I really analyzed the look of the palette in pictures, but I didn't really come to this realization until I got it in my hands and started using it, that this is truly a palette of extremes. The darks are very rich and dark. The light shades are quite shiny. And if you plan on making some pairings, you know, and using both the dark and the light, you're going to have a lot of high contrast with a lot of your looks. And that may not be for everyone. If you've been in the summer of doing barely their eye looks and you're kind of liking looks that just look like minimal, if not no makeup eyeshadow basically, this one is kind of saying, hey everybody, this is a real eyeshadow palette. This is something that people who want to do eyeshadow are going to be using, okay? If you just kind of like eyeshadow and if you just, you know, gotten in the habit of getting new ABH palettes every so often, like this is a pretty serious palette. If you are thinking, gosh, I like the plummy idea, but I want more mid-tones, I want more in-betweener kinds of looks, think about ABH Primrose. It's still available, and I feel like it's a little more gentle than this one. This one can go very, very deep. And I've been enjoying all the options that are in here. I want to talk for a minute about some of the different looks I've done because it will just bring up some different things to discuss. So the first look I did, Fireside, is definitely what's giving that glow on the inner lid. That's so pretty in with the deeper tones. So I know I have some crimson on my outer corner. I have a mix of like leather and ember in the crease. This kind of became my started out crease shade a lot because there's not a lot of in between, like I said, with this palette. This is still a pretty dark shade. That's maybe as middle of the road soft as it gets with this palette. You know, just dipping my toe in. And then I really went there with it on the next look. I feel like I went pretty dark on the outside and I used a lot of Midnight. Okay, Midnight is the one like red flag in this palette. This created so much fallout immediately and throughout the entire day. Like I think I must have gotten a lot of that shade in my lashes and it just kind of sifted down because every time I would look in the mirror as the day went on, I had more stuff. And that's the dangerous kind of fallout, you know, not the kind where it's like, oh, I just got a couple specks there as I'm doing my makeup, I'll whisk it away. If it's still creating an issue all day long, it's probably landing on skin that has not been freshly powdered and it is absorbing, it's adhering, it's attaching. I had something to do that night and I just felt myself going over it with powder several different times during the day. That is the type of shade where if you want to use that, number one, I would probably change the entire order of my makeup if I felt oh, I must use this shade. Like, it looks smooth and it looks fairly unproblematic, but I think I loaded up my brush and it went flying. But I would do eyes first, then face if I thought I was really gonna use a lot of this plum. Also, I would just be very, very intentional about the way that goes on, because again, the problem was not merely an application, the problem was that it was sifting down later on too. So I would really go a little at a time on the brush. I would make sure I'm really pressing it onto the lid. It created a very pretty look there at the get-go, and I incorporated actually some of Divine, the purple, as I went inward, and then I layered Crown further in, and it gave me that kind of like yellowish green pop on the inner part of the lid. I loved the look, but I pretty much determined that Midnight was the problem child in all that, because it was dark shimmer that I was getting on my face. So just beware of that. I'm not saying it can't be used, but my goodness, if I pull it in again, I'm going to be very careful, and I'm just going to be aware of what it's capable of, okay? For the next look, I actually experimented with a little bit of one of the greens on the outside. Both greens in this palette are pretty dark and murky, I will say, but there are interesting layering opportunities that bring out a little more color potentially. You got Crown here, you've got Moonlight, you've got some things that can sort of change the game. But my key shades in this look were Twilight, which was the very dark green, and then Smoke, which turned out to be so reflective and light, even more than I was anticipating. And then I like blended inward a little bit with Moonlight on that look. I remember when I was creating the look, I put a fair amount of this dark green on the lids, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a pretty dark look, but I overlapped so much with Smoke, and it turned out to be so much brighter than I thought that it really lightened up the entire look somewhat. And then later that day, I was just up here playing, and the rest of the face makeup does not look good. Like, things were wearing away. We had gone to the playground that day and I sweat a lot, but I deepened up my look like crazy. I was just playing. So I added in a lot of crimson and mulberry, and the haze that you see, the almost rosy looking haze coming out of the crease is Divine, is that purple. And I have that blending really beautifully up above, and then a little bit of Fireside popped on the lid. I absolutely love the way that looked when I just kind of was playing around and adjusting it. So again, a palette of extremes. Is this for everyone? I don't think so. When you look at this palette, it is mostly earthy, neutral types of shades, but they are so deep and dark that they really do make a statement, I think. It's hard to avoid the depth you're going to get out of this palette. And mid-tone wise, like just saying, okay, I'll use a light mid-tone, I don't really feel like going dark today. Anytime I pull this out, I know it's going dark in some manner. Leather is kind of a started out type of shade. We went with a little different strategy with how we began the look with today's. You'll see that. Ember is honestly a pretty deep brown, you know. I just feel like they didn't waste really any space with this palette. They're all types of shades that are gonna make a statement. They didn't even say, hey, we'll give them a light colored highlight, or we'll give them, you know, one or two different shades that are gonna be very obvious crease colors, like maybe one, and then everything else is just really going there. In terms of my favorite shades in this palette, I love Crimson and Mulberry. Crimson, the depth of this matte, it's so pretty. It layers in well with like everything else in the palette. It's such a good anchoring color. I'm really glad it's there. And Mulberry has this soft sheen to it that is so pretty, and it's pretty kind of merging a dark outer lid shade with the rest of your crease. Both of those two are just gems, and I love Fireside. The pairing of those three is stunning. And one other kind of heads up, when you see this palette and you're thinking, oh, I'm a green lover, I'm gonna get this. Well, I feel like the greens are fairly muted greens. This one on my ring finger is Thorns right there. It's got a little more lightness, and then Twilight is very deep and dark. Those shades can be affected by like taking a light shimmer like Crown and kind of layering it in, and then look, you do get a totally different take on that green. So it's possible to liven them a little bit more, but they are just as is very dark. So now I want to show you the look I did today. We've got a little bit of some purple going on. Here is my tutorial. So I've got my face done. We're about to do the eye look. I thought I'd let you know what I am wearing today. It's the Hourglass Ambient Soft Glow Foundation, which I wear in 5. I've been pulling this out a lot lately because I feel like it's looking so good on the skin. skin and it's wearing well too. This is the Natasha Denona Concealer, the High Glam Concealer in R2. I've got that on the under eye area and elsewhere. I set that with Maybelline Fit Me. There's another product I've been using repeatedly. I've got my What Shady Beaches bronzer on from Wet n Wild. My blush today, I went kind of dark, and you can see how it shears out on the cheeks. It's not quite that dark, but it's the Clinique Cheek Pop in the Black Honey Pop shade. A little bit of highlight today. This is the Bare Minerals Highlighting Blush. Much more of a highlighter than a blush, but it's in the Rose Glow color. I've got a little bit of that on top of the cheekbones. I also did my brows with my little Estee Lauder 3-in-1. The shade says Cool Brown, and Milani eyeshadow primer across my lids. And I also do get the crease area. So now we've got our Fall Romance palette out, and we are going to begin. I'm going to start out by using a flat brush instead of going straight to my crease. I feel like with a lot of looks I've done so far, I've been tempted to go to leather first, this cool kind of medium taupey color. It's kind of a deep taupe. I've been using that first in my crease, but I think I'm going to go to crimson, get that on the outer lid and kind of blend that out too. This is a matte. So I'm picking that up with my flat brush from Morphe. All things that I use are linked in the description box below, but I'm gonna get that all over my outer lid and flip my brush so that it hits the crease as well. It totally matches the little sweatshirt I have on. It's not quite sweatshirt weather around here, but I just, I had to pull it out for this look. I'm really ready for the fall wear, let's get out of the t-shirts, let's get out of the short sleeves, let's put on some sweatshirts and sweaters. Only I'm just one of those hot people. I'm not meaning hot cute, I'm meaning hot sweaty. So like when I see vlogs or things of people like chilling in the summertime in a sweatshirt, that just would not work for me. I would feel suffocated. Okay, so we've patted crimson. Interesting that it's called crimson because like we think about University of Alabama and their crimson and it's much more red, but this is a very deep like wine color. So I've patted that on, and then I'm going to take a bare small brush. This is my small pointed brush. Nothing added to it, and I'm just gonna see how much this blends that and that alone. Softened it up a little bit, but I think we're going to need some color here. So I'm going to go to Mulberry. Mulberry has kind of a satin finish, real like deep rust, a lot of brown in it, but some warmth too, but again, dark. And I'm going to take that to my crease and definitely overlapping some of the crimson, but working this shade more in an upward fashion. I have really liked working with Mulberry. I've used this immediately in the crease as well. It's pretty dark, but it's a very easy texture to work with. Kitten, stop. See how this is starting to kind of nicely fade out here now? Look at that. I'm really liking that look. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of Ember right up here. So Ember looks like a true brown, and it does have a little bit of a sparkle in it. It doesn't come off like ultra sparkly in application, but I've got some of that on, like a dab of that on my crease brush, and I'm applying super lightly. Okay, so our color can start to rise up, but I don't want it looking super dark, Oh, I really like Ember Sheer. That shade looks really good in that way. Taking it up, almost hitting the brow. And this palette really doesn't include a highlighter shade that you'd really want to put under your brow. So you want to think about having a blending brush and just, letting your brow be the highlight. And, you could pull in something else if you want to, but this palette doesn't have that type of a shade. Just making a little adjustment here, but I'm going to add a bit more crimson to this outer part. And since I've got that brush in my hand, I'm going to use that again. Got the product on the tip, and I'm going to take it down below the eye also. Crimson. Smudgy, smoky, definitely a dark shade. Oh, I really like working with that tone. Now, which shimmer do we want to pop on the inner part of the lid? Not that you'd have to. You could keep a dark shade in here and keep it just a very rich look, but I just want to demonstrate one of these shades in action here. I love Fireside, but I've used that one quite a bit. That one pairs so nicely with all these deep colors. Moonlight, look at that kind of purpley glaze. Smoke down here at the end. Don't overlook that one. That one is shiny as all get out. I mean, it probably has more reflectivity even than the ones that appear to be lighter. And we have Divine in here, thumb swatch. A soft metallic. This one can look really pretty sheared out on the edge of a look, or you can pack it on. I'm going to take a little Divine with a small flat brush. And I'm going to place some of that on the inner part of my lid for those curious about, you know, what does that do for your look? Got all this depth, and then we have like this bright purple, but it's interesting. It's really well done because it has this gentle sheen. It doesn't look like, oh, here's a cheesy purple sparkle on your rich look. I kind of like the addition of this shade, and like I said, also it's really pretty sheer. And then I'm going to come in with Moonlight. It kind of looks like a glaze type of color. It's pretty overlapping. It's not a purely what you see is what you get color. I feel like it doesn't really show up like with that amount of opaque intensity, but it does give you some shimmer and some pretty overlap. And there's my shadow look for today. I'm not seeing really any fallout from these shades that I used. Everything was easy to control, easy to blend. We worked with some real darkness, but also kind of a pop of color. So I'm gonna come back with the finished eye in just a second. I went across my upper lash line with a liner pen. It was the Too Faced Better Than Sex one, and I came out and winged it just a little bit. I also pulled my eyeshadow up kind of in line with that wing from the underside there. Just makes a little more sense of the wing. And then I used Superhero Mascara on my top lashes, Cali Ray Come Hell or High Water on the lower lashes, and my lip, I used this Milani matte lipstick in the shade Passion, kind of a dusty rose. And then I neutralized any redness in that shade by using this liner from Hard Candy in the shade called Boyfriend. So this is a very brownish deep nude. I just blended that into the color of this lip because I wanted something dark, but I didn't want something that would really compete color-wise with the pop on the lids. So guys, just to sum this up, I'm really enjoying this palette. To me, it's like a fall vibes palette, but it's giving me a little something different and some different inspiration compared to every other fall palette I have. You guys, if you saw my like palette display video where I curated my collection of fall palettes, this feels different than a lot of the things that I just pulled in thinking, oh, this is a fall palette. It's not loaded with cinnamon kind of warmth. It's not just a bunch of dusty rose. It's a palette that truly causes you to create, I think, some high contrast looks on the eyes, some very dark things paired in with some things that can just absolutely shout. ABH, I think, is really good about taking 12 shades and maximizing it, you know, not giving us a bunch of overlap, not giving us a lot of shades that are just going to turn out a similar look, but really this is fun. But I don't think fun is what everyone is about for their fall eyeshadow vibes. So just think about, am I more into the barely there eye? Do I like things that have less contrast? Do I like to stay focused in a no darker than mid-tone sort of range with my looks? Again, the Primrose palette, it gives you the chance to go deep and dark, but I feel like there are more true middle ground shades in that palette. And this one, when you look at Fall Romance in the images online, it makes more of these shades seem more mid-tone than they are. Like Thorns doesn't look nearly as dark. Mulberry looks like a completely different shade, practically peach in the picture. Ember seems lighter. Like, gosh, the photos online do not show the true contrast like you will see having it in your hands. So anyway, guys, I like it. I'm enjoying it a lot. I think it will continue to be a really great palette fall into winter. So please let me know your take in the comments section. I would love to hear. Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you again very soon. I love you. Bye.